What do you think that the flat Earth can bring to everyone if we get enough momentum behind us to maybe bring it mainstream? What can it do for all of us?
Well, you know, I actually think it is becoming mainstream already. There was an article that came out in Forbes magazine talking about the Kent Hovind issue. Like, you know, here's a guy who just came out of prison and all of a sudden he's being hounded by, you know, his supporters with flat Earth. And it's certainly gaining momentum, no doubt about it. I mean, I put up a YouTube video and within a day it's got 2,000 hits on it, you know, and it's like, wow, you know, people are searching. And I would say everybody has the exact same response. We all have the same response. This is crazy. This is stupid. This is absurd. Why are you even thinking, what, you've lost your mind? We all have the same initial response. But for those who actually take one day to try to research this stuff for themselves, at the very least, they become hooked and have to spend another day and another day. And the more you spend looking into it, the more you're going, I don't know what to believe. You know, belief doesn't equate to truth. You know, you can believe whatever you want to believe. I want to prove it. In my efforts to try to prove the globe, it's falling apart with horizon tests and seeing things that we shouldn't be able to see. If the ball is real, the math shows that, you know, with the curvature, there are things we should not be able to see, and yet people are seeing it. So that has me really questioning the globe, and I don't question the math because that math came from globalists. It came from people who believe the globe. So it's not math conjured up by flat earthers. And the best example for that really proved that to me was when I was in Malibu a few months ago, talking with another writer who's partnered with me for my Seed the series that we're working on, and he says, you know, I've been following your flat Earth stuff, and I got to tell you, I'm really interested. He said, because I grew up on Ventura. I used to be a lifeguard on Ventura Beach, and on a good day, on a clear day, we could look out and see the Anacapa Arch. Well, the Anacapa Arch is almost 20 miles away, and it's only 40 feet high. So the math says that if we're on a ball, 25,000 mile circumference ball, that the top of that 40-foot island arch should be over 200 feet below our ability to see it on the other side of the curve. I said, look, I know I've heard these stories and I've seen the Chicago thing and all that Chicago skyline from the other side of Lake Michigan. I've seen the math that people are using. I'm not mathematically inclined, so I need help. Do you understand this math, or do you know somebody that can confirm this math? He goes, yeah, as a matter of fact, I got a good friend of mine who's a professor at the university. He's a math professor. I said, great. Pose it to him as a word problem and see what he says. Don't tell him anything about why we're looking into this or why we want to know. Just give it a word problem. He said, okay. So he goes to the guy. He says, you know, we're on a globe that's 25,000 miles circumference, right? Yeah. What's the math? Like, you know, how would we calculate for the curvature? Let's say if there's an object 40 feet tall and 20 miles away, how far below the curvature should that object be, the top of it? So the guy said, oh, that's easy. He did the math, did it all up on the board, and it came out to, you know, over 200 feet. And so he shows it to my friend. My friend says, so you're saying that math proves that we should not be, because of the curvature of the Earth, we should not be able to see an object 40 feet tall, 20 miles away. Should be over 200 feet below my ability to see it. That's correct. My friend turns to his friend and says, well, the problem is we've all seen it. And the guy goes, what are you talking about? He goes, the Anacapa Arch. And all of a sudden, this math professor who just did the equation on the board is having the Flintstone sound effect go off in his head, you know, as the gerbil jumps off the wheel in his head. As he turns around, looks at the board, and he's like, we shouldn't be able to see that. So, you know, that's what confirmed the math for me, because I'm not mathematically inclined enough to figure it out, so I can't confirm it for myself. So here's a math professor who did the math, and he used the same equation to came up with the same result and acknowledged that we shouldn't be able to see what everybody has seen. So, you know, that's the kind of thing. I mean, none of us are likely to get up above, and you're going to have to get up above 73 miles. I've seen the hot air balloon, weather balloon stuff, that when they don't use a fisheye lens, you know, fisheye lens is going to morph everything, and you know it because you can see when the balloon's taking off, you know, they're 20 feet over the car, and the horizon looks like this. That's smaller than the moon. And then when it starts going up, the horizon starts morphing. We're in the incredible morphing Earth. But when the horizon goes across the center of the lens, that's where it's going to be the most accurate representation of what the camera is actually seeing without the lens distortion. And I've seen plenty of stuff at between 100,000 and 130,000 feet that's flat as a pancake. But I've also seen rocket footage, one from the 1950s that was 65 miles up. When the horizon went across center lens, flat. Saw another one recently shot up by the Germans. They had cameras on it. They were doing some sort of experiment. And same thing. When that thing came across, the lens came across the center, the horizon came across the center of the lens at 73 miles high, flat. So, all the visual evidence that we can do terrestrial. I mean, you get this book right here, Zetetic Astronomy, and read through this book. And this is done in the 1800s, 1865. What I love about this is this is before the Wright brothers and before NASA, before anything that we have today. This is all terrestrial-based observations that you and I can do ourselves. And when you do this, every time it's showing flat. And when I read of numerous accounts that this guy documents and footnotes and everything, I haven't gone and personally dug up the archives, and I haven't had time to do anything like that. But he gives, at least in his time, documented, annotated, footnoted accounts of people seeing the blood red moon lunar eclipse taking place while the sun was still up. Well, I mean, the model that we're all told is the only way that works is if the Earth is here and the sun is here and the moon is here and the cone-shaped, umbra shadow of the Earth, that's the only way you get the blood moon, is over here. But yet, if the moon's turning into an eclipse and the sun's still up and you're on the Earth and you can see both, something else must be causing the eclipse. So, and then when I looked at that, I saw that many ancient cultures believed that there were other dark orbs or dark objects or invisible objects that were also part of our system. And the Hindu version of it was particularly interesting to me. Rahu and Ketu were the two entities that they named as the ones that basically were responsible for, they were decapitated heads, interesting, I used that earlier, that would try to swallow up the moon. But because it's a decapitated head, when this spherical moon object came up on the moon, that's the illusion that we see of it turning red, and the moon just kind of goes out the neck of the decapitated head. That's, this is, the mythology develops because the people had a certain mindset and they were trying to explain things. This shows that the Hindus had the same mindset of an enclosed world within which the sun and moon were inside a dome, and they were trying to understand, well, what is that thing covering up the moon? And what is that covering up the sun? And I still think the moon is responsible for the solar eclipse, the moon coming in conjunction with the sun. But as far as the lunar eclipse, it can't be the way we're told in modern science if it's happening while the sun is still up. So I tend to believe, I mean, hey, why not? In heliocentric, spinning globe, monkey man science, they're all talking about dark matter anyway. So dark matter is like the buzzword phrase these days. And you got others talking about Nibiru and Planet X as a dark planet, supposedly going through our solar system. So why not? If you can embrace that in the spinning heliocentric globe model, why can't you accept it in the possible, enclosed world model? I'm looking at all the possibilities, looking at the available evidence and trying to weigh it with reality and see what makes the most sense. But when it comes to this issue, I do think it's critically important because it affects everything. If this is the great deception, I don't know what, I mean, if it turns out to be true that we're in an enclosed flat circular Earth set on pillars within which the sun, moon, and stars are placed, then we're in the great deception right now, because there are vast amounts of Christians, including Kent Hovind, Brother Hovind, and others that are dogmatically against what I believe the scripture tells you point blank and up from a literal interpretation, that they're against it. And they're embracing evidence that is coming from primarily NASA, the government, and the military. Three organizations that have proven to be completely untrustworthy on numerous counts. If we were to put them on trial, they would all be guilty of being pathological liars. And I would say also Luciferians in many ways, because of all the secret societies that our presidents have been involved with. And, why does our astronauts have to be Freemasons, stuff like that. All right, do you see Photoshop?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And if those of you think this technical difficulty was planned and think I'm scamming you, go do it for yourself. Because you're going to find the exact same thing. I got nothing to hide here. This is live on the air, okay? I'm going to zoom in on the Earth in Photoshop. Can you see the Earth?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to go to Image, Adjust, Levels, and I'm going to bring the levels over here. And I'm going to bring the levels up. Uh-oh. What is that?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, wow. Why is there a square box around the Earth allegedly taken from the scientists on the moon in Apollo 17? And people wonder why I don't trust NASA. That's why I don't trust NASA. I mean, they're always out there saying, you know, Rob, everybody's trying to show you stuff from space and you keep rejecting it. This is why I reject it. These guys are liars. I mean, anybody who has Photoshop can just go to the NASA website, download the photo, do exactly what I did, see for yourself. Then you got other pictures like this, the blue marble, right, that come out. Okay, well, there's a big problem with the blue marble, and I'm going to zoom in here and show you what the problem is. These are all composite images where they are really not very good at Photoshop because they're using the Photoshop clone tool to replicate clouds. This cloud is a copy of this cloud. See the formations? They're identical formations, side by side.
Wow.
Right? These right here, side by side, side by side. See this kind of W-looking shape right here, replicated right here. This cloud is exactly the same as that cloud. You know, same clouds right there, and same thing on the other side of the world. They got the same thing going on. They got careless. Here, look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the same formations replicated right there. These two replicated, same exact formations right here. This right here is clone of that right there. I mean, really? So you're telling me that we could take pictures of Jupiter and Saturn, huge, massive planets, and now we're out going to Pluto, but we don't have one legitimate picture of the Earth from space that's not a composite? Really? So I'm saying at this point we need to be testing all things, test everything, because with this model, with the enclosed world model, evolution goes out the window. Ancient aliens, that whole idea, obliterated. And what are you left with? A creator that made a terrarium that we're in. I mean, so people ask, well, what's the motive? If we really are, if the spinning heliocentric globe is wrong, what's the motive for NASA to be lying to us?
And that only leaves why. Why have they done this? What's the point of this grand deception? I think Eric Dubay explains it best.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, our eyes and experience tell us the Earth is flat and motionless, and everything in the sky revolves around us. But when we cease to believe our own eyes and experience, we have to prostrate ourselves at the feet of these very pseudoscientists who are blinding us, treat them as experts, astronomical priests who have special knowledge only they can access, like the Hubble telescope. So by brainwashing us of something so gigantic and fundamental, it actually makes every other kind of lesser indoctrination a piece of cake. Earth being the flat, fixed center of the universe around which everything in the heavens revolves gives a special importance and significance not only to Earth, but to us humans, the most intelligent among the intelligent designers' designs. By turning Earth into a spinning ball thrown around the sun and shot through infinite space from a godless Big Bang, they turn humanity into a random, meaningless, purposeless accident of a blind, dumb universe. So it's like trauma-based mind control, beating the divinity out of us with their mental manipulations. People are always asking, why do they do this? I mean, other than the obvious profit margin motive, NASA being the biggest black budget black hole in existence, sucking in over $30 billion taxpayer money for the fake moon landings alone. Nowadays, hundreds of billions of dollars, and not just NASA, but RASA and all the other fake space organizations around the world giving CGI images for hundreds of billions of dollars. So this modern atheist Big Bang heliocentric globe Earth chance evolution paradigm spiritually controls humanity by removing God or any sort of intelligent design and replaces purposeful divine creation with haphazard random cosmic coincidence. And so by removing Earth from the motionless center of the universe, these Masons have moved us physically and metaphysically from a place of supreme importance to one of complete nihilistic indifference. If the Earth is the center of the universe, then the ideas of God, creation, and a purpose for human existence are resplendent. But if the Earth is just one of billions of planets revolving around billions of stars and billions of galaxies, then the ideas of God, creation, and a specific purpose for Earth and human existence become highly implausible. So by surreptitiously indoctrinating us into their scientific materialist sun worship, not only do we lose faith in anything beyond the material, we gain absolute faith in materiality, superficiality, status, selfishness, hedonism, and consumerism. If there's no God and everyone's just an accident, then all that really matters is me, me, me. So they've turned Madonna, the mother of God, into the material girl living in a material world. Their rich, powerful corporations with their slick sun cult logos sell us idols to worship, slowly taking over the world while we tacitly believe their science, vote for their politicians, buy their products, listen to their music, watch their movies, all sacrificing our souls at the altar of materialism. It's a big deception. I'd say it's the biggest cover-up and conspiracy in history. We've been completely deluded for 500 years.
See, that's the motive. That's the, and all of those who follow that Luciferian mentality of getting it. Charles Lyell got us to question the timeline of creation. Darwin got us to question whether we are created in the image and likeness of God or from goo to you by way of the zoo, as Ken Hovind would say. And it makes sense to me in a way that this is coming up in the 21st century, because if we are indeed in the days of Noah, where we are starting to see a repeat of what took place that led to the corruption of all flesh and evil continually and violence, then in the book of Daniel, it says in the last days, knowledge will increase. In the Hebrew there, the letter He precedes the word, and the letter He is the. It's the knowledge will increase. So could it be that that's what we're seeing right now, is the original knowledge is increasing all of a sudden? I mean, boom, who was talking about this last year? Maybe Eric Dubay, maybe, and a few others, but now it's like one of the primary hits on Google right now. Keyword search is flat Earth. So for me, I'm trying to nail this down, because if this is the truth, then it exposes so many lies, it's unbelievable. And at that point, you are forced to say, I can never trust NASA. I can never trust the government of any country in the world. Well, who can I trust? Well, the only one I can trust then is the one that proved this model is true and that model is false, and that would be the creator of this terrarium. That's pretty big.
For the first 4,000 years of our civilization, we believed that the Earth was a flattish disk surrounded by a solid dome barrier called the firmament. All of the 5 major religions had their own version of this, and the churches enforced the belief. Then, around 1514, a man named Copernicus created a new model of the world. He stated that if the Earth was spinning around 1,100 miles an hour and circling the sun at 60,000 miles an hour, the world was then round. The religions, seeing that this globe model was gaining popularity, feared a loss in the fan base, so they all adapted their religion to include the globe model. From their point of view, it was a small change from a circular to a globe world, and really, in a few generations, who would remember anyway? And while the math more or less worked, there was a problem. It was 1500, and the technology to prove such a theory wasn't there. The first balloon to carry people wasn't invented until 1760. Sailboats were the only travel over water, and the fastest thing on land was a horse. But the new worldview was promoted and took hold. The religions adapted to handle the new reality, and life moved on. More importantly, the globe model was quickly introduced into the education systems. Over the next 500 years, the challenges to this model faded, to the point where the globe was accepted as universally as physical laws such as gravity. Read that again if you didn't absorb it. For 20 generations, people believed that the Earth was round because there was a globe in every classroom they sat in. There was no proof. Hundreds of years went by, and still civilization had no way of proving the theory. Planes were invented around 1900, but until 1957, nothing could go high enough to give a true perspective of where we lived. And that's when everything got strange. The United States and Russia both sent up rockets high enough to take decent pictures, and what they saw scared them a great deal. How do we know they were extremely concerned about the sky? Because the US and Russia immediately started firing nuclear weapons straight up, and they kept firing for the next 4 years. A few things to keep in mind here. First, this was now 1958. Nuclear weapons were very expensive and hard to come by. These also weren't those nominal yield 20 kiloton toys we used on Hiroshima. This was high kiloton to low megaton, and we couldn't get them up fast enough. And the strangeness continued in other places. In 1959, only a year into the atmosphere bombardment, 10 nations, including the United States, made Antarctica off-limits to any colonization. A treaty was put in place, and to this day remains intact. Over 50 nations now have signed off on this treaty. Do you know any treaty that has lasted that long between all industrialized nations? Moreover, do you know any piece of real estate in the world that is owned by no one? You would think at the very least one of the large oil companies would use their huge financial resources to explore this region, and yet they don't even petition the idea. The short version of the discovery is this. By 1958, the military had discovered the very solid upper and outer edges of our world, and had to create a way to put up "Do Not Enter" signs without looking obvious. It was tricky, but if there is one thing I have learned about the authority, it's that nothing is left to chance. Most of the work had already been done for them, so their job was primarily in the details. The sky part of the dome was much higher than commercial air traffic, so the only thing they had to worry about there was the space program, which is immediately militarized. The outer border had the natural benefit of not only an extensive ocean, but a scaling decrease in temperature and a steady increase in iceberg frequency to discourage ships, all leading to a permanently frozen landmass that could not be used for any form of agriculture. This ocean and ice layout had worked well for thousands of years because the technology of the current civilization didn't evolve quickly. Sailors avoided cold weather seas whenever possible, and oxygen levels get low enough to harm people, even on high mountains. The brilliance of the design comes in the simple fact that human males are corrupted by power. Corruption so total, in fact, that they would rather hide the world itself rather than risk their power on it. You could theorize that kings and popes were told of the world a long time ago. Maybe an ancient scroll or book. Perhaps an interdimensional being told the tale of what the world looked like. But this was all but dismissed because even the most powerful leaders of the day couldn't reach the borders. And if they couldn't, what chance did the general public have? It's one thing to be told of the giant impenetrable dome, but it's a whole different animal when you finally stand right next to it. Then the tough decisions have to be made. Do we keep the secret? And how far are we willing to go to keep the status quo? Once they decided to keep the secret, no expense was spared. The rapid progression of rocketry science had to be addressed quickly, and so the moon missions were created. Matt from the NASA channel was right in his thinking that you needed the moon mission event to stage a picture of the Earth from deep orbit, and that couldn't be more true. Establishing NASA as the frontrunner of space exploration also diverted people who would have otherwise created their own space companies for profit. The best engineers, technicians, and pilots were recruited to the NASA space program. Once there, they were compartmentalized on a need-to-know basis. The astronauts know of the deception and are sworn to secrecy under the penalty of whatever motivates them. Private space programs are discouraged, sabotaged, or absorbed into the NASA fold. Private sector spacecraft are just not going to be allowed for several reasons. The most obvious is the collision with the dome itself. The telemetry data from such a mission would show an impact failure at a certain altitude, and if repeated, would raise questions NASA just isn't prepared to answer. There are 3 perpetual questions about our world that can't be eliminated, but avoided at all costs. These are the questions you should ask yourself and others if this protective layer is going to be lifted. I'd like to preface this with a thank you to Max Malone, a conspiracy hardcore who has a knack for boiling down debates to a single paragraph whenever possible. It was he who said, after over 50 years and thousands of hours of space travel footage, both by NASA and other countries, there is no exterior shot where the astronaut completes the simple act of panning the camera 180 degrees, let alone a full 360-degree sweep. This has never happened on any moon mission, exterior space station, nothing, ever. Statistics will tell you that this would have already happened by accident years ago, but it hasn't, and it won't. This is because of the rule they cannot break, the same rule that applies to television set shows that never show the fourth wall. Why? Because there is no fourth wall. Number 2. When you search online for pictures of the Earth from space, 95% of what you will see is a collection of artificial composite shots. In 2000, when I did this search, there was exactly one picture by NASA showing the bottom part of Africa and Antarctica. Now that picture is hidden within hundreds of simulated images. There are HD cameras everywhere, and no one is taking a shot of the Earth, because you can't get enough altitude to do it. Number 3. The commercial air travel routes for the southern hemisphere are wrong. This is an easy thing you can check out in 60 seconds. Take a map reading of the distance between anywhere near Australia and anywhere in South America. It's a straight shot across the South Pacific. Now find your favorite travel site and try to get there non-stop. See what happens. The routes start turning ridiculous. I used to business travel for years, and I've never seen anything like it. It's the one thing in the general public world they can't hide, the actual distance between these two places. On a round world, the flight is easy, just a straight shot across an ocean. But on a flat world, it becomes the greatest distance between 2 points. There are no shortcuts, so they distract you with multiple connections and layovers. It's only blind luck that the United States was in the northern hemisphere. Otherwise, the increased traffic would have raised eyebrows by now. And hundreds of years went by, with science promoting all the aspects of the globe, and the religions promoting their beliefs upon this globe. The world kept spinning, so to speak, and everyone was happy. Then in the early part of the 1900s, you get this pesky explorer named Richard Byrd. He has family money, all the right connections, and secures basically unlimited funding and the government green light to probe every piece of unseen territory there is. It was inevitable, I guess. A young man who has an unquenchable desire to see all that there is to see, and then granting him the tools needed to accomplish this goal. He pulls a Truman and gets lucky, crossing the vast salt ocean, avoiding the icebergs, arriving at the frozen coastline, and he keeps going. He was never going to stop. One day, after crossing hundreds of miles of high-altitude ice and snow, Admiral Byrd sees it, a barrier. And to him, it's just a barrier, not the barrier. He is but a tiny speck in front of it. It stretches out on both sides as far as he can see, and straight up so far that he can't discover the beginning of the arc. The great explorer now has a new challenge, finding the shape of this thing. It's much like a blind man describing the elephant. Until you feel out the whole thing, what do you really know? If you look at the AE, or Flat Earth Overhead Map, you see the problem. To even determine the scope of the outer wall, you have to circle it. It would have taken months, if not years. You could use a series of ships going in opposite directions, or planes, but there are refueling stations that need to be built, and so on. His task was challenging to say the least. Admiral Byrd kept laying the groundwork of the great discovery until his eventual death in 1957. A year later, the United States and Russia found the upper edge. From there, the math was easy, and moreover, you could actually see the real world. Then, of course, there is the decision, or deception, depending on how you looked at it. The authority made the call to hide the actual shape of where we live, then sealed off the outer edge from prying eyes, and created the space program not only to reinforce the globe model, but to control it. Know that mountains were built for you. Oceans were built for you. All of this was built for you, your struggles and your trials by fire. It may be today, it may be tomorrow, but one day the curtain will close and this stage will be struck. And when the dust settles, no matter where you are right now, you'll see the big picture and have new eyes, and you will be shown what wonder really is. And as you leave this most magnificent of theaters, heading towards the next, my hope is that you'll pause, look back at the stage and say, I was actually in it, you know, right there in the thick of things, and it was a sight to see. Because it really is a hell of a ride. Imagine what the next one will be like.